Welcome back to the Kesgrave Panthers Podcast. Today, our guest is seven-time British champion, Bob Prince. How are you feeling today, Bob?
I'm cool. I'm very, very tired. I've been racing at Wentzfield this afternoon in the Eurovets. That's my first racing afternoon since March last year. I've had various injuries, as you do when you get older. So, yeah, my legs are really tough. But apart from that, cool.
How did you get on in that then?
I got to the A final, which was remarkably good considering I hadn't done any track time at all. A lot of it is up here, obviously, but sometimes your brain writes a check that your legs can't cash, and it's a bit tough at times.
Yeah. So let's get into it. And so, how did you get into cycle speedway?
Well, like loads of kids, there was. I'm going back to 1963 when I first started, and I've ridden every single year since then, which is a bit of a record. But back then, there was not a great deal of things that you could do. There was very little money around. I had a brother and two sisters. My brother Keith, he ended up riding for Birmingham and Dudley, just like me, And we were very poor. We had no shoes. Me and my brother actually shared a pair of flip-flops, and he walked down the road going flip, and I walked down the road going flop. Anyway, there was very little to do, and some local kids on the council estate where I lived, they actually built a track. I'd never seen Speedway or anything, and I just happened along one day, and a school friend of mine, Freddie Whitehouse, he was blasting around this homemade track, and I thought, I like that. The only problem was I hadn't got a bike. So, like dozens of other kids, down to the scrapyard, found a complete bike, ladies' frame. You probably won't understand this, but it had a Sterling Archer 3-speed back wheel, which probably weighs 3 times heavier than your bike. And off I went, and it was absolutely fantastic. Couldn't believe it because I was okay at it. I weren't very good at football or cricket, but cycle speedway, wow, that was mine.
So, do you remember what your first official meeting was?
The first proper meeting where they had sort of like tapes, starting gates, and perhaps even a referee in the middle.
Yeah.
That was probably in 1965. I was spotted by a guy from Tipton Invaders. Tipton Invaders was a really good local team with some good talent in it. And they invited me down to a training session, and I did okay. And the following Sunday, I took part in a Coventry and District League match against Coventry, but they were called a different name then, Earlston, and they operated out of Earthwell Common, where the Coventry club is now based, and that was my first official match.
Yeah. So I introduced you as 7-time British champion. Can you remember how you felt after the first of those British titles? Did you feel good or pumped, or
Relieved, more than anything. Just like you guys, I've lived and breathed the sport, and I've missed out in the past on various championships, this, that, and the other. And when it finally happened, I thought, well, great, that's a monkey off my back. It was such a relief because, you train and you train and you train, and you put your life and soul into it. It's crazy, really, because, it's 4 mad guys blasting around a track on bikes with no brakes, and people looking in from other cycling disciplines, they must think we're just nuts. But I loved it, and I still love it. And that was a great feeling winning that. It really was.
So you now referee, like you mainly just referee. Would you say that you enjoyed that as much as the riding?
I get a lot of satisfaction from refereeing. I would imagine you're going to ask me how I got into refereeing as well. Well, I'll explain. I was over at Leicester in 1989 for a British final, age-related final, and the podium places at this particular final were changed by some, should we say, nepotism by the referee, who totally got a couple of decisions wrong. And Rod Witham, big old mate of mine, passed away recently. He was there, and I wandered over to him, and I said, "Did you see that, Rod?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "It's a bit iffy, wasn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." I says, "Well, what can we do about it?" He said, "Well, I can't do anything about it." He says, but you can do something, Bob. I said, "Oh, what's that?" He says, "Well, you can take up refereeing." And I'd already done a bit, you see. And I thought about it, and I went back home, and I said to the wife, I said, "I'm thinking of taking up refereeing." I says, "What?" I said, "Have you had a bang on the head or something? Have you got concussion?" She said, "You must be mad." Says, "You know all the grief you've given referees over the years. I mean, they're designed off the rule book because of my tactics in the sport." Yeah. So anyway, I sat down, I thought about it. I said, "Okay, then we'll give it a go. But if you give it a go, Bob, you've got to be the best referee there's ever been." And that was my aim. Yeah. That was in the back end of 1989. And in 1991, I refereed my first final of Thurrock. And I get great satisfaction from the fact that you can make people's dreams come true without them being cheated out of it. And that happens a lot in the sport, believe it or not. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I get great satisfaction out of it. And I think I've done okay over the years.
Yeah. I believe I have a list here, and I believe you have officiated at 17 major events. That may be incorrect, but Andy Parr supplied me with a list.
It's probably more than that. Now, on the world stage, it's probably up to 24. That includes world finals, Federation Cup finals, major test matches, and so on and so forth. So, yeah. But a lot of those I got mainly because I was the only one prepared to travel, the other side of the world to referee. I mean, I really must have had a bang on the head. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I've only got the individual open meetings for this, but like, why like are you the only one who's committed to go? Is it because you want to be the best, or do you reckon something else you want to do?
I'm driven, I suppose. Like everything I do in the sport, I want to try and do it to the best of my ability. I've been an administrator and whatnot for 40 years. I've done every single job in the sport. So no, it ain't just about a matter of not travelling, but somebody's actually got to step up and do it. Whatever the match is, without the referee, rightly or wrongly, that match wouldn't take place. So I've always tried to do my best, and that involves and includes travelling, Poland, Australia, up and down the country, and I get great satisfaction from it. Love it. It's my life.
Would you say that you have a favourite meeting that you've been the referee for?
That's a good question. That is, Charlie. Believe it or not, some are much easier than others. For instance, the British final down at Horsepath a few weeks ago was really simple. They're easy. It's individual riders, you see. They're riding for themselves. Same amount of passion, obviously, but that would never compare to the old Elite League matches, for instance, when you went down to Horspath and they were riding Sheffield and they were knocking 9 bells out of each other. That sort of match is much more difficult to handle. You've got team managers on your back, and there's a lot of passion. So the ones I like doing most of all is the ones when I get back home at night and I don't toss and turn thinking, did I get that decision right? Did I get that decision wrong? So they give me the most pleasure because, you get it, you think you've got it almost perfect.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Elite League. Did you enjoy refereeing the meetings from that? And do you think they should possibly bring it back in looking into the future?
Okay, there's two questions there really. I enjoyed the intensity of the Elite League. It got a bit too hectic at times from the point of view of teams wanting to win. And it's a strange thing, you see, because with the team events, you've got 8 guys and you've got a team manager. Now, none of those guys in that team want to let their teammates down. But sometimes, and riders very, very often don't agree with this, sometimes as a rider, you're not good enough. You're either not fit enough, you ain't got the brain for it, you ain't fast enough, you ain't got the technical ability. And then there's 7 guys in the pits telling you that you are good enough, plus the team manager. So when it don't happen for you, you tend to react against the guy that's standing in the middle. Yeah, but on the day, they were fantastic matches. Moving on to the second part of your question, the Elite League was discontinued purely and simply because there weren't enough Elite League riders in the sport. So what started off as a great concept for the sport and was really well embraced with clubs flying poles in and all the rest of it, it fizzled down to, do you want to ride in the Elite League match next Sunday? Although you're only a second team rider. And that was the scenario, and that's why that was discontinued. If the sport can bounce back from COVID and various things, it would be absolutely fantastic to reintroduce either that competition or something very similar, because the top guys in the sport need to race at the top level. For various reasons over the last couple of years, that hasn't happened.
Would you say that you have a favourite track?
Okay. Ask any single rider, including yourselves, if you win something that will say Edinburgh or Wensfield, that's going to be your favourite track. Yeah. Some of the tracks, I think, are too big and too fast, because what that does, that takes away all the technical ability you'll need if you're racing at the Polo at Newport, for instance, or down at Ellingly. I like Ellingly. That's one of my favourite tracks because it's tricky and you need to think about it. You put the same sort of match on it, we'll say Newport or East Park, but it's totally different. It's just flat out brute force racing. So I like the technical tracks. And I mentioned Edinburgh. I like Edinburgh because I've always done well there. I won a British final there. So, yeah, I would say the smaller tracks that need some technical ability are my favourite tracks.
So, am I correct in saying that you are currently riding for East Park?
I am riding for East Park, yes.
Yeah, so what, if you could make a change to that track, what would you say that change would be?
Basically, with East Park, it's very big. Yeah, you're 2/3 down the straight, and your brain says turn, because it's been programmed to do that over so many years. But at East Park, you've got to keep going, and there's not many racing lines at East Park. It's very easy to ride. Yeah. So if I wanted to change that First of all, I change the shape, make it more technical. Either make it shorter or change the surface so that it slows it down a bit. See, the problem these days is everybody likes all the dirt swept off on every single track, you know. And I mentioned Ellingly. If you take one of the top guys to Ellingly and he tries to race around Ellingly with his usual style and power, he probably ends up getting beaten by an 8-year-old because of the technical difficulty of the track, you see. So with East Park, I'd either reduce the size, slow it down and change the shape, or get an e-bike. Yeah.
So, what are there any differences like refereeing in Poland and Australia compared to here?
Oh yes, without a doubt. Poland, it's very much more physical. You know, they'll batter you about. No disrespect to the Polish guys. I think they're probably the best thing that's happened to the sport in the last 30 years, you know, because they really took it to another level as far as professionalism is concerned and fitness and diet. So yeah, it's very physical in Poland. In Australia, it's very surprising sometimes. I mean, when we went over there in 2013, they employed ever so strange tactics where they'd just ride you all the way around the outside for 4 laps. No intention of racing. Their job was to keep you on their back wheel, and it was strange, very strange. So you have to adapt to that. And as a referee, the first match there are refereed over there, I made sure that after the first race they were racing, because believe it or not, it's called cycle speedway racing. Yeah. Over here, it's fairly straightforward. You know who's going to give you an hard time. You know who's going to shake you by the hand and accept that, you know, they've got a gate exclusion because they moved or they've chopped somebody up. But so yeah, it's all different, and every meeting's different, and you prepare yourself differently for each of these meetings. Yeah, you have to be in the zone. You have to be professional, or try to be. Sometimes it's very frustrating in trying to do the best you can possibly do, and some guy who ain't trained for a month and he's been on the beer hurls abuse at you because he ain't good enough. So there's all those things.
All right, so I believe you were awarded the Wilkinson Sword for services to Cycle Speedway in 2015.
You're right, Noah, yes.
How did that feel when you found out that you'd won such a prestigious award?
Very, very humbling. When you look at it, I don't know if you've actually seen the thing, but the names on that shield, that sword, absolutely amazing. You know, these are people that I've always looked up to and tried in some cases to emulate. Yes, so that Wilkinson sword, wow, that's magic. If you ever get, you know, if you're presented with that, you've earned it. You really have. But there's a better one than that for me, and that's the Dave Brinston Trophy for Referee of the Year. You see, and what happens, you're probably not aware of this, but at the end of every match, team managers get a form to fill in, and that's the referee's assessment form, and they mark you. The maximum's 5, the lowest is 1, and they rate you, yeah. And you can imagine that teams just lost. Last week decider, one of their guys gets excluded. He's irate. You hand him a piece of paper and you say, "Can you tick all these boxes for me, please?" You know. But winning the Dave Brinston one is fantastic because the managers have voted for you. You see, and I've won that about 7 times, and that's a real that's really satisfying, because people within the sport have had a look at you and say, yeah, that guy's all right. I'll give him these many points. So yeah, but the sword itself, spot on.
You mentioned that on the Wilkinson Sword, there were people that you looked up to. Who were these people?
Well, there's a couple really. I mean, you got Mel Perkins, obviously. Mel's transformed large parts of the sport. Mel introduced the British Youth and Junior League to the sport. That particular competition has been absolutely fantastic, and it's brought so many riders into the sport and allowed so many riders to compete at the top end. And then, of course, you've got Rod Witham, I worked with for 12, 14 years on the old Cycle Speedway Council. He was another guy who he was a visionary. He could foresee what was going to happen in the future, and the old Cycle Speedway Council was able to plan for that, And he brought so much sponsorship into the sport, produced a fantastic book, and there's loads of names on there. There's some riders on there, one or two I don't agree with, mostly riders turn up, ride. If you're lucky, they'll pick a brush up and sweep the track if you're lucky. But generally, apart from riding, they don't contribute anything to the sport. Jimmy Varnish is on there, of course, my mate Jimmy. That was well deserved. He was the figurehead for so many kids coming into the sport. Just like these days, you've got all these young lads, you've got yourselves, for instance, Mr. Brinkoff and Lewis, and they're the guys that younger guys look up to, But getting back to the sport, the sword, Ian Brown, for instance, Ian poured loads and loads of money into the sport. Archie Wilkinson, good friend of mine who we lost recently, he equipment-wise, Archie kept the sport going purely and simply by subsidising all the equipment he was selling. He must have took a really big hit over the years on trying to sell cycle speedway equipment. So Archie's on there, and that's great. And my little name's on there, you see, and I think that's remarkable. A scruffy little kid who come from nothing with holes in his shoes and trousers, which is very fashionable these days, and my name's on there, so fantastic.
You said that you used to work on that old Cycle Speedway Council, and I believe that's like you're now on the commission. So like, what sort of stuff did you do and now do on these organisations?
Well, it was slightly different back in the Cycle Speedway Council days. We were funded by Sports Council, so every 3 years we had to submit a financial plan, and in fact, in 1996, I submitted the last financial plan to Sports Council, and we received £147,050, and that was to run the sport for 4 years. That included the wages of 2 part-time assistants, overheads because the office was in a converted garage. That covered 4 editions of the Spokesman magazine per year, referees' expenses, training courses, and stuff like that. So back then we were in charge of all the money that was coming into the sport. Okay, and we could plan and basically do whatever we thought was best for the sport. It's different now, and this is one of my biggest disappointments, really. We've been with British Cycling now for 20 odd years. They provide us with an administrator, of which there's been a couple of excellent ones over the years. Brian Finesse, who did the job, he was spot on, he was red hot. not just on Cycle Speedway, which he had a passion for, and which he visited. He come to Australia with us as well one year. Paul West, another one, and they understood the sport. The biggest problem and my biggest regret, I think, is that British cycling have, to some extent, ignored the sport instead of having a look at Cycle Speedway, the best, easiest, grassroots, entry-level cycling discipline, and had a look at and thought, fantastic, that's the model that we're going to use to drive kids into, so the kids come out the other end that can either stay with Cycle Speedway, where they've developed all this skill, that can move on to track, that can move on to BMX, that can move on to road, because they've learned all these technical necessary skills within the sport. And for whatever reason, British cycling have failed to do that. British cycling are great at certain things. I'll probably get kicked off the commission for this, but British cycling ain't good at Cycle Speedway, you know. And a lot of people over the last 20 years say that, well, you know, all we are is a bit of a cash cow to British cycling, you know. They take the money and give us nothing back, which probably isn't true, you know. But certainly over the last 20 years, various promises that were made to us when we joined British cycling have certainly been broken. I mean, they promised that we'd keep Cycle Speedway handbook in the directory. That's disappeared. Spokesman magazine was guaranteed that was going to be 4 times a year, and they pulled the plug on that. You know, they're good at the other stuff. They're good at the coaching side of the sport, putting the courses on, child welfare, DBS is all that sort of stuff. And of course, the branding, British cycling, is fantastic. But I don't think it's fantastic for Cycle Speedway. This is my opinion only, not the views of the commission.
So
Next.
do you think there are any other things that need to change in the sport?
The only problem with the sport is that the general public don't know about it. It's been, all the time I've been in the sport, there's only probably been 2 guys who've excelled at the publicity side of it. One was Rod Witham, who I mentioned. Rod brought in Norwich Union, the Daily Mirror, and that sort of sponsorship. And the only other guy really was Joe McLaughlin, who you probably don't know Joe. Okay, Joe as a living, Joe ran entertainments, he student discos, bands. He was managers of various bands who you've probably never heard of, so I won't mention the name. And he could put a real good show on, you know. I mean, he was attached to Coventry. You know, basically Coventry is a track in a field. But when Joe got it in his mind to put on a good show, nobody in the world of Cycle Speedway could live with him. And we need that. We don't sell ourselves nationally or locally. I went down to Horsepath like a lot of people, and there was no posters knocking about. As far as I'm aware, nothing on the local radio, certainly nothing on the local TV. Now, that's nobody's fault but our own. You know, we need to sell it. It's a fantastic product. It really is. You know, the British final at Horsepath was tremendous. Now, if you could bottle that and let the general public have a taste of it, wow, the sport would grow overnight. And that's what we need. We need to sell the sport. People don't know about it.
Well, I think we've got this a great amount today. So thank you, Bob, for talking about your refereeing experiences and your views on what should be improved in the sport.
Yeah, no problem, and stick at it. Because like I mentioned, you two kids, you're the future. Yeah, so stick at it, guys. And I apologise if I've upset anyone this evening. But if they know me, they know that I've got the sport at heart.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
That's right. Thank you, Charlie, for joining me as usual.
Yeah, cheers, Charlie. Thank you.
We will see everybody next time. Goodbye.
Yeah, see you guys.